Hi, Terry. How's it going?
It's going. How are you?
Very good. It's like people are slowly starting to roll in. That's awesome.
Great. We love that.
Yeah, we'll give it a few minutes before we start with the conversation, but it's awesome to see you.
You too.
Yeah, I really appreciate your availability. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Positioning my screens on my end. So we missed you at the MAPS conference.
I know. I had some
Ah.
serious FOMO, but
Your birthday was that weekend?
yeah, it was Saturday.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah, that's
you.
fantastic. Celebrate with the family?
Yes, and my foreign exchange students' family was here from Brazil too, so it was a little bit larger celebration than usual, so it was great.
Awesome. How'd the trip to Disney go?
Oh, you mean their trip?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if you were going with them or not.
No, yeah, they did a grand trip. It was amazing and whirlwind. They did Los Angeles, Hollywood, Universal, Disneyland, Vegas, and then came back very exhausted. So,
I bet. I bet. Super cool.
yeah,
I want to give it one more minute before we officially begin. We had a lot of people register, so I think some more people will come on in the next couple of minutes.
great. And then will the replay also be available?
Yep, 100%. I put all of these up on YouTube, so you only have to go to YouTube to get it. However, anybody who registers will automatically get a link to the replay.
Great.
Have you watched any of these other videos on YouTube?
I don't think I have.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, yeah. I know you're busy. And we're going to dive in. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Joining me today is Terri Hirning, a longtime IonCleanse practitioner and an integrative wellness coach. Terri has 15 years experience supporting families and brings a thoughtful, compassionate perspective shaped by her own personal journey. Terri's a businesswoman, a researcher, a coach, a mom. She's done it all. And Terri, I'm so grateful you're here sharing your time with us. As
Gosh.
always, we'll do a Q and after at the end of the call. But we're just going to dive in right now and get to know Terri a little bit better. Terri, when I first met you, I was really surprised to hear that you are a huge fan of a specific style of music. Tell me about that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'm a rap and hip hop fan.
Yeah. I heard driving in your car is like going to a club on a Friday night.
It certainly can be. And that's actually one of the things that, Neil Maroney and I bonded over very early on when I first was introduced to AMD and foot bath technology and met Neil. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. You've been in the autism and chronic illness space for nearly 2 decades. What started this journey for you?
It was my son's diagnosis, quite honestly, because the person that I am today largely has been molded by that journey because it was when my son was 4, almost 5, and he's 22 now, we received his diagnosis of autism. And when we received that, the prevalent messaging around autism was that it was a purely genetic condition, and because of the severity of my son's autism, we were told as a family he would never live independently, that he would need to be institutionalized when he got older, that he wouldn't drive, he wouldn't go to college, that largely, the lack of expressive language, little eye contact, lots of sensory meltdowns, no sleeping, like where he was pretty much what we could expect in the future. And for whatever reason, I knew nothing about the integrative or holistic world at that point in time, but there was something that told me that that was just not the right thing, that that couldn't be what my son's future was going to be. And that sort of thrust me into exploring outside of the box thinking in terms of health and wellness and the way we look at autism. And that was what really sparked me understanding the gut-brain connection, understanding the role of toxicity, and how many individuals with autism have underlying biochemical things going on that, when addressed, result in improved language, cognition, attention, focus, mood, sleep, you name it.
That's that sounds fantastic. When you first got your son's diagnosis, what felt sort of most overwhelming or most unclear?
Everything. Everything. There was so little about autism back then, and it was scary and it was overwhelming. Just trying to understand because, one of the biggest pieces is that while an autism diagnosis, it's way more common now, as we've seen. Lots of people understand a general aspect of what autism is, but at its core, it's so different for every individual. And that was the important piece, was trying to figure out and unwind my son's story and what happened, what might have been a trigger, what was exacerbating things like meltdowns. Why was his belly so distended? Why didn't he respond when I was calling his name? All of these different behaviors. The whole, part and parcel was overwhelming. But it was just one day at a time. And I think also the understanding that as a parent, while we can have amazing physicians and practitioners guiding us, we do hold the cards for our children. And it was once I started to understand what an impact I had as a parent, that was really exciting to me because we are with our children more than anybody else. And it was so amazing to be able to do the things that were resulting in positive changes for him.
When you said do the things that resulted in positive changes for him, like how many things did you try?
A lot, a lot. I mean, I have had we had an amazing physician, and he was on board with almost everything that we wanted to do. When I first went to him, we wanted to do all of the testing, hair, urine, blood, stool. We just wanted to get a really good picture as far as what was going on. And he tasked me with some books to read on autism and a biomedical approach and what we might be looking at. And so that sort of put the onus on me. I had homework to do, and I knew, one, I wanted to be really prepared. These consults were expensive, and I wanted to maximize my time. And I really took that to heart. And when I would find something that some other family was talking about that might make a difference in their child, and I dove into the mechanics of what it involved. And I wanted to try something. He was on board. So, right out of the gate, we did dietary intervention, and that was one of the biggest foundational pieces. I had a child who was reacting to wheat, dairy, soy, dyes, preservatives, MSG compounds, things like natural flavorings and maltodextrin. And when you start dissecting food labels, it's very overwhelming. So there was a big learning curve for me. And this was the time before many commercial gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, allergen-friendly foods. So I spent so much time in my kitchen cooking safe foods for him. And I would have other families say, "Gosh, doesn't that take a lot of time?" Yes, absolutely. But I took my child from melting down almost constantly. Charles, like when I say how unhappy and unhealthy Matthew was. He just was screaming and crying and just a miserable feeling child. And so to be able to make foods that were nourishing to him, that weren't inflammatory, that weren't causing sleep issues or aggression or meltdowns, I said I would gladly spend, all of the time in the kitchen and have a happier, healthier child than not do that and be where we were. So dietary interventions, and then really it was tailored to what was going on with him. So supplements have been a part of our journey for a very long time, whether it's a high quality multivitamin, multimineral, things for inflammation, things for histamine response and leaky gut and all of those things. We've done some pharmaceutical things like antifungals and things like low dose naltrexone, which is an immune modulator. So we had done the gamut. Our doctor recognized pretty early on that toxins were an issue for Matthew. And as we look at our world, unfortunately, toxins are an issue for a lot of us. And there are also certain genetic predispositions that make it sometimes harder for individuals to detox. And so some of the common things that were recommended were things like glutathione supplements, glutathione being a master antioxidant and helps the body detox, and things like Tylenol acetaminophen can certainly diminish the body's natural production of glutathione. And if you've tried to give glutathione to a little kid, it can be rather challenging because it is a sulfury smell and taste, and it's not super palatable. Another option that we were told about was a sauna, and we immediately went out and bought a sauna and made sure it was, all wood and no adhesives, and trying to get a little, 6-year-old to sit in a really hot sauna. And at the time, we lived in Phoenix, so it was hot a lot anyways. But, he didn't sweat. His body, he didn't do a lot of sweating. So certainly there was a lot of impaired detox. So when I talk about like what our journey looked like, it was a lot. It was a lot of trial and error, healing, as much as we all would like it to be, healing isn't always linear. And so we would have improvements, and then there would be some regressions, and then there would be wrong interventions, and then right interventions. So a lot of it was try something, document, try something else, document, and, lather, rinse, repeat.
Over the years, like working with families and friends and as people in your network, what patterns have you seen of people and families navigating something like this that might help more people understand or get a head start?
Well, getting a head start. So, patterns. That is a great question because understanding sort of either the larger triggers or the pattern of your child's version of autism, right? So, like when we talk about autism, it is a broad diagnosis based on, more psychiatric diagnostic criteria. But when we look at autism, there are certain categories of kiddos. So you have gut kiddos. My son was a gut kiddo. So he had leaky gut, yeast overgrowth, Clostridia overgrowth. When yeast was flaring, he was silly, goofy, giddy, giggling in his crib for no reason. When his Clostridia was flaring, he was much more irritated, frustrated, could not tolerate when things, didn't go smoothly or didn't go his way. That was when toys started to get thrown or he started to get aggressive. Um, so there are gut kiddos. Certainly, there are kiddos that are impacted after viral or a bacterial infection. So, if the child has PANS or PANDAS, whether you see some of those OCD tendencies or like a switch gets flipped overnight where your child comes down with something and then immediate personality changes, behavior changes. So, understanding and being able to look at your child and sort of piece together which pathway to go down can be incredibly helpful. And when I say that, that's sort of with the understanding that certain foundational pieces are there. And I think for a large percentage of children with autism, nutritional intervention has a role. Some basic supplementation has a role. And working with a provider who can order laboratory testing to give you some idea of, is your child a gut kid or a pandas kid, or what's going on? Because if you don't understand truly what's going on at that biochemical level, it's sort of, shooting in the dark a little bit, and it's a lot of trial and error. And nowadays, there are so many amazing test options out there. There are lots of families that have navigated this journey with great success in certain areas. Again, understanding where your child sort of falls on that spectrum can help guide where you go next.
You described your son as recovered. What did that journey actually look like, or how did you get to that result?
That is a really great question, and I like it because I just want to make it really clear that when I started exploring, okay, so he's been diagnosed with autism. What's happening in our family? At that point in time, he wasn't sleeping. He was craving and requesting mostly carbs and sugar, starchy, carby foods, and sugars. He couldn't chew certain textures. He couldn't handle certain sensory inputs. Sound sensitivity was off the charts. He would put himself in dangerous situations. We had to put up all sorts of baby gates just to keep him safe. So when I say we embarked on this journey, it was because this was not something that was sustainable. No one in my family was sleeping, including especially him. His growth was stunted. He had severe constipation. There were underlying things happening that once we got a diagnosis of autism, suddenly began being chalked up as, oh, that's just autism. So when I started going down this road, it wasn't with the intent to recover him. It was with the intent to address, why is his belly bloated? Why does he only want to eat carbs? Why is he addicted to milk? He would want to carry around a sippy cup of milk rather than eat. Why, when he would be out in the backyard playing and he would cut himself, did he not feel pain appropriately? All of these different things. So as we started embarking on this journey, and we would make some changes or bring in some supplements, and we started to get language. We started to have him respond to his name. He started sleeping. These were just such huge pieces to our family. His teachers and therapists started noticing things like, what's happening? He doesn't need to be in the autism specific classroom anymore. Like, we're able to mainstream him. What is happening? And so things just got better and better and better. And so when he entered, we were in a suburb of Phoenix, and we were in the Gilbert Public Schools. When he entered at just before 3 years of age, so we were in early intervention, even prior to actually getting an official autism diagnosis. He was tested using a CARS evaluation. It's the Childhood Autism Rating Scale, and he rated in the severely autistic range. We started doing really heavy biomedical interventions over the summer because there tends to be regression over the summer. We were going to have him home more. I was going to be able to monitor nutrition and supplementation at a, better rate than when he's in school for a few hours. By the time he went back into school that fall, the teachers were astounded at the improvements that had been made. So by the time he was ready to launch for kindergarten, they redid the CARS eval, and he came out in the not autistic range. Now, that's not to say he didn't still have significant social challenges. He was still getting occupational therapy and speech therapy, and there were still some things that I would consider, somewhere on the autism spectrum. And so as we just kept fine-tuning things, that was our journey. It was never more than how can we make him the healthiest, happiest individual and allow him to lead and live a fulfilling, amazing life that I firmly believe, he was meant for. So, we had sort of plateaued and it was around 11, and that was when IonCleanse entered our lives. So, when I talk about recovery, um, uh, it was really just this process of unfolding and addressing what was going on for him to get sleep, get language, get eye contact, get I love you, mom, get, having friends, having a job, being in college now, all of those things. And it's been just an amazing, amazing process to be a part of and to watch.
Yeah, it's been cool for hearing you speak about it over the last couple of years. So, at what point did detox or detox support become part of your approach?
It was a part of it very early on, but there were things that we couldn't really touch, like I mentioned. So I had worked for New Beginnings Nutritionals for 16 years. I recently resigned. And as such, their former sister company was the Great Plains Laboratory, and it's now Mosaic Diagnostics. So Great Plains had the GPL Tox panel, which was an amazing panel that looked at toxic chemicals in the body. It's a urine test, and we had run that for Matthew many times. And so we were pretty intimately aware of what was going on with him and what we really couldn't reach. So, like I mentioned, we were doing glutathione, certainly detoxification through his diet, minimizing additives, cleaning up, making sure most of his food was organic, and minimizing what was coming in, but even just trying to tap into what was already there, even from such a young age, was challenging. And even things like sauna therapy weren't moving the needle for us. And so that was when I was working conferences for New Beginnings. And so I would see Ion Cleanse by AMD at these conferences, and I honestly was super skeptical, and I thought it was pretty hokey, and I didn't think there could be much really scientifically to what was happening with people's feet in the water. And in fact, I was really resistant to even trying a session. I actually don't even think I had tried a session until you guys reached out to an autism organization that I was part of and said, "Hey, we'd like to look at what our foot bath can do for individuals with autism." And it went out in a group post, and I immediately raised my hand because I was like, I can do testing because of my affiliation with New Beginnings and Great Plains. And I would actually really love to debunk this whole thing. And I have lab testing and can do lab testing. That was sort of how I went into it. And Neil said, okay, we're going to send you out these units and you guys can cleanse your whole family. And I was like, okay, all right, it's on, right? And so we got our unit. Matthew was 11. We had just had Christmas and he had gotten this toy called a Perplexus ball. And it's sort of like a mouse trap. I don't know if you
I
guys
know exactly
remember.
what they are. There are two in my household. Our family loves them. Yeah, they're lots of fun.
Well, Matthew did not love it. It was a little too, I don't know, complex. I don't know, but he immediately gave it to his younger sister. Okay, fine. So, that's just in the back of my head. So we had just had Christmas. I get him his first foot bath. It was a 20-minute session. I'm going to dump the tub and I'm getting ready to refill it for my daughter because, Neil had said, you guys all can cleanse your whole family. And we had to do the ATEX scoring. It's a subjective rating scale. It's called the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist. It's available online. I highly recommend parents and caregivers you complete this because it's a great scorecard, if you will. And especially if you're going to start different interventions, it's a really easy way to sort of keep track of what's changing for your child. And so Matthew's ATEX started out as a 25. Okay. So, you can have high numbers like 100, and that's more severe forms of autism. And then the lower the number, then theoretically, the lesser autism symptoms there are because it is a rating scale of symptomology. So we had completed the ATAC. We knew we were going to do it every 30 days. I had just given him his first cleanse. He literally gets up from the dining room table, goes into his sister's room, gets the Perplexus ball, comes back out, is sitting there calmly doing this ball. So I look at my husband and I'm like, I don't believe in coincidences. And here I was already set up to think that there was not going to be anything substantial coming from this. Okay. So later we get in the car, and by this point, Matthew was fully verbal. He's 11 years old. He's, in a mainstream classroom, the whole deal. And he would answer a question, but he wouldn't proactively say, "Hey, would you like to do this?" or "How's your day?" or whatever. So we go to get in the car, and he turns to his sister and he says, "Hey, Emma, do you want to play I Spy?" So that was like right after a single cleanse. And I started to open my mind to the possibility that this wasn't a fluke, this wasn't a hoax, that there might be something to this in a broader way. And over the course of the 120 days, I was absolutely blown away because by the end of the study, his ATEC was a 3. And, some of those things that we really hadn't been able to address, we were finally able to address. And he had improvements like even his handwriting improved, which was a really big strange improvement from detox, but actually several parents in the group reported that their children's handwriting improved. He had oral biofilm that was resolved, and while there wasn't a test for gut biofilm that I knew about, but I firmly believe gut biofilm was positively impacted over this course because we also really had great resolution of some gut things that we were working on with him. One of the biggest things that really opened my eyes was he no longer needed B12 shots, and B12 therapy was the literal first intervention out of the gate when I started working with a biomedical physician. So this was like a long-standing intervention that I assumed his body was going to need forever. And, I think it was really unburdening the body and allowing the nutrients to get in and do their thing, whereas the toxins were probably binding to those cell receptor sites and just interfering with that cellular communication, waste going out and nutrients coming in. And so, it was nothing short of miraculous. And that was truly what made me a believer in this technology.
What was the main driver or purpose for the B12 shots?
That has been a very long studied intervention in the autism community. When you look at autism and you look at especially genetic SNPs involved with MTHFR, that has been one of a very well studied segment of the autism population that really just means their bodies need more B vitamins, B12 being one of those key nutrients, along with folate. Not folic acid, but some kiddos do really well with folinic, some do really well with L-methylfolate. There's been a lot of hullabaloo in the political realm about leucovorin. So it's pretty well known that B12 interventions can bring about, especially improvements in expressive language. So the B vitamins are also very influential and tied into that methylation cycle in the brain. And the methylation cycle is also linked to our own internal melatonin production. So that was one of the things that we also saw. So we did see improvements in some social behavior, some expressive language, and also his sleep. So it can be a really important intervention for individuals with autism.
I always associate B12 or B vitamins with energy. So it's interesting to see it also has a benefit for sleep. Um, That's cool. So on people watching on the call watching this, Terry has a basic encyclopedic knowledge of supplements and physiology. And some of these questions I'm asking her for my own personal gain. Yeah, just haven't had a chance to pick your brain on it yet.
I got you, Charles.
Yeah,
Anything you need, you let me
yeah,
know.
yeah. Thank you. So what what have you consistently noticed in kids or families using the ion cleanse over time?
There are a couple of things. Y Typically better sleep, and that's across the board, not even just kiddos with autism. So, a piece of this, as you know, I don't need to tell you this, a piece of this technology is helping the body move from that sympathetic dominant state, that fight or flight, into rest and digest. Now, I have an interesting story actually that came from an autism conference. So, I mean, first of all, I know this is not interactive, but I don't know of an autism family who doesn't feel at some point in time or most of the time that they and their children live in fight or flight. Okay. So whether there's a heightened sensory situation going on, like I mentioned, lack of sleep, there can be underlying infections in the body that produces that heightened fight or flight response. And most of our children, okay, I'll speak for my child. My son was living in fight or flight. And trying to get them into that rest and digest, it can be really challenging. So I was at one autism conference. I think it was Autism One, and there was a young man who was similar in age to my Matthew. So this was when he was probably 16-ish. And mom said the same thing. He's just in go mode, not necessarily hyperactivity, but just stressed out, in a heightened state, on guard all the time. So he sat down for a foot bath, and his water did not change colors for about 10 or 12 minutes of the 20-minute session. And you know as well as I do, there is some general color change that oftentimes happens within the first 2 or 3 minutes, and not all of it is even from the individual's feet in the water. It can be from just general stuff in the water that the ions are interacting with.
Hmm.
And when we're at a conference, there could be 5 or 6 people sitting next to each other. So when you look at the response, you can see vast differences. Okay. And so mom was right next to him. Mom's color change was changing much faster than his was. So I said, we got very little color change. And I'm not saying color changes everything. That is not at all what I'm saying. But, the important thing is that he still got exposed to those ions. But what I would like you to do is come back tomorrow and let's put his feet in the water again and let's just see what we see. Well, they did. And now it changed at about 7 minutes in. They came back the next day, changed about 5 minutes in. They came back, it was a 5 day conference. They came back another day, started changing at about 2 minutes in. What I see oftentimes, and I've had mental health professionals sit down to do a cleanse, and I've had one say, I deal with generalized anxiety, and I have for my whole entire life. During this session is the only time I haven't felt the weight of the world on me. And I felt a lessening of that cloud of anxiety and worry. And so a piece of it is moving the body into that rest and digest state, which is where we detox. I mean, you can't detox when you're wound up and stressed out. So, lessening of anxiety, better sleep, a feeling of calm. I actually had my youngest client was 18 months, 19 months when he first came. The family came up we live now in Flagstaff. They came up from the Phoenix Valley, so it's about a 3-hour trip. Mom and dad had little guy on their lap, and we stacked up a bunch of tubs, put his little toes in there. We did a 10-minute session, Charles. They went home, and that baby slept for 12 hours after a single cleanse. And, they were very similar to my family where sleep just, it was a non-negotiable. There wasn't sleep, which, is really harmful for everybody in the family just from a health standpoint. So to be able to get sleep after a single 10-minute session, and even therapists that were working with this little boy the next day noted changes. So, the things that I see are just, and I've stopped. I actually was telling clients this in the office on Monday. I said, I can sit here and I can tell you what are some of the common things that people report. And some of them are what I just shared. I said, but I've stopped trying to predict how toxicity is impacting an individual in front of me because I've had people call me after one cleanse and say their vision has improved. I've had just the wildest stories of and it was the same thing when I saw my son's handwriting improve. I would have never thought toxicity was playing a role in fine motor. So, it really opens the mind to the potential of what can be improved in the body when we are releasing the burden of toxicity.
Yeah. So I hate to interrupt this flow, but I do want to say to everybody, I forgot to say in the beginning, the ion cleanse doesn't treat or cure any illness, disease, or condition, right? All it does is detoxify. But oftentimes, things you're experiencing that might be attributed to a pathology might not be a pathology. It could be related to toxicity. And when the ion cleanse detoxifies, your body can then do what it's supposed to do. So the person that saw better, the ion cleanse didn't make them see better or repair their eyes. It just detoxified their body to a point where there wasn't a toxic interference with their vision, and now their vision's working better. So I just wanted to interject that. But it is outstanding and incredible the impacts the ion cleanse can have on people. Why do you think something like the ion cleanse, it's gentle, tends to resonate with families dealing with complex or sensitive cases?
Well, I think when you look at the realm of what's out there, like I'll use our experience, like trying to get glutathione into a toddler, it's not super palatable. When you're trying to look at sauna therapy, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, maybe they're sweating, they don't want to be there. I find that the ion cleanse is really soothing and relaxing. There are people who say, "Oh, my child's never gonna sit in that bath," and I say, "Just give it a try. Just give it." I like when I tell you, because in the first Thinking Moms Revolution study, what were there, Charles? I'm going to put you on the spot. 24, 26 families
Yeah,
ish, right?
between 25 and 30, I think.
Okay. So they ranged from two or three up until like I think Matthew was one of the older kids, like 11, 12, something like that was that range. And even the non-verbal kiddos were going, this is how we morphed the cleanse schedule from every other day to 3 days on, 1 day off, was some of our children were requesting cleansing in between our cleanse schedules. So, like innately, I felt like these kids know what's helping them. And like the 19-month-old, to be able to sit even for 10 minutes and it made such a dramatic improvement. It's easy. It's painless, literally. It's not another supplement and then you're having to worry about absorption. Did they get it all in? Did they spit it all out? It's not uncomfortable at all. They can read a book, they can color, they could do an iPad or watch TV or whatever. So it's really easy to do. And one of the things that when I'm working with a family and they're looking at considering, like for example, the family down in Phoenix, they couldn't come to see me 3 times a week to do cleansing. So they bought their own unit. And the way I look at it is I look at my clients' money like I would look at my own. And as an autism mom, there are way too many interventions out there to be had, and there's expense for diet and supplementation and lab testing and consults, and the list goes on and on and on. And none of the stuff that is actually effective is ever covered by insurance, it seems. So I understand what it means to be an autism family. And the fact that you guys have the money back guarantee that you guys do, I would always tell my clients, we're going to put together, you're going to do that ATEX score. We're going to put together a cleanse schedule that really works for you. You're going to see and feel a difference, or you're going to return it. And I've had maybe one client over the past however many years return a unit and then actually turn around and regret it. But really, like, it sells itself, and nothing is more indicative of that concept than my being here today because I was like the biggest hater at first. So.
Yeah, I've had more than one customer return a machine and then a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, call back and they say we made a mistake. We need to repurchase. Yeah, it's very common. However, the 60-day money back guarantee is part of this process. If you haven't purchased an Ion Cleanse and you're considering it, do know that you have 60 days to try and return it. No hassles, 100% money back. We understand if it doesn't work for you or your family, we want you to be able to use that money somewhere else. We know it's a large purchase, so we're happy to work with you on that front. It's part of the offer. Terri, from your experience as a mom first and now working with so many families, I'm curious how tools like the Ion Cleanse fit into the bigger picture.
So the way I look at this is, and I've changed my thinking over, a decade because my previous thinking was always, pushing in a lot of supplements, and certainly I still stand by diet, nutritional intervention being foundational. But the way I look at it is in looking in hindsight, especially that B12 issue. I was spending a lot of money on supplements putting into that maybe weren't being absorbed or utilized. And so I've taken a much more conservative approach. I still think that supplementation can be incredibly helpful to get over certain hurdles or roadblocks. Certainly, long term, my viewpoint is very conservative in terms of I don't like to overuse supplements the way that I am criticizing of the mainstream medical complex using prescriptions, right? So my thought process and philosophy is that once you remove a lot of those roadblocks, maybe some basic supplementation is necessary, but that's it. I find that I get to that point a little bit faster if we can address toxicity. There seems to be less hurdles to get over if we've looked at detoxification first and then can move into whatever else is needed. So, my thought process has changed a lot, but I think detox is such an important piece that it has to be one of those first line interventions. And the point being, there are lots of ways that you can take toxicity into your own hands, just like starting today, and then looking at either finding a practitioner that uses Ion Cleanse by AMD technology. And that is important because it is a dual polarity machine. We didn't even really get into the technical pieces of Ion Cleanse, but I'm sure you guys have covered that in other webinars. But it's really important to give the body the ability to excrete what might be blocking or hindering, sort of clearing out the field, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. And you touched on this earlier, and I may have actually stolen or co-opted this line from you, but when you talked about nutrition, right? If you're on this call right now and you're considering an ion cleanse and you're not eating organic, that's probably foundationally one of the biggest changes you can make to see an impact or or difference in your life and your personal wellness and your families is going from wherever possible, inorganic to organic. And then we're not possible. There's this really cool list, the clean 15, the dirty dozen. If organic's out of your budget, oftentimes we're just shopping the clean 15. So I would say start there if you want to start somewhere, don't know where to start.
Yeah, and there are lots of really great resources. I've done blogs on cleaning up your kitchen, removing things like Teflon and looking at, water and your air. There are lots of ways. I mean, my husband used to joke because every time I would come home, back in the day, they used to have the DAN conferences, and those were great because you had doctors in one area and parents in another, and they had tracks for both. And so you'd be running into your favorite biomedical physician, but then taking your own biochemistry course, which was so great. And I understand that MAPS that I missed this year because of an injury, they're doing the same thing. And the parent education piece is so critical. And once you understand what's going on, I found it easier to make these changes. And I would literally come home and my husband would be like, "What are we getting rid of now? What's going to be delivered? Okay, now yeah, sauna's coming. And we're getting rid of this mattress and and yes, I went a little bit probably overboard because once you start learning about these different things, I mean, I'm sure my daughter hated me for banning nail polish and, hair dye and all the other fun stuff, right? Once you start delving into exactly how these chemicals are interfering with your child's hormones, with contributing to cancer, contributing to all of these negative health outcomes, it becomes easy to throw out that George Foreman grill. Sorry, George, or go through and clean out your kitchen and go to glass instead of plastics and, things like that. And when I always am like, parents, go easy on yourself, right? Like I'm sitting here 17 years down the road, right? It does not have to. Rome was not built in a day. You do not have to go through and throw everything in your kitchen out. Small steps equal big changes. So, I don't want anybody leaving this, webinar feeling bad about themselves. If anything, I'm hoping you see this as an impetus, one baby step every single day, and you will be miles down the road before you know it.
Yeah, it's a famous line. Everybody overestimates what they can do in a day and underestimates what they can do in 3 years. Yeah.
Yep.
If a parent is early in this journey and feels overwhelmed, what's one thing you'd want them to understand?
Well, one, you're not alone. And early on, I heard an expression that's so true. Autism is a marathon and not a sprint. And it's really important to really take some time to understand your child, their patterns, their behaviors, be able to understand what's triggering them, whether that's a food additive, be your child's detective. I have a sheet that I created. That I send out to clients, and it's a daily log sheet, and it helped me keep my sanity in this process and be able to, when I had that very expensive consult with my physician for 15 minutes, it helped me get laser focused on exactly what my son was reacting positively or negatively to, what we had done in terms of his diet, how his mood was, therapy sessions. I mean, everything. And that's a really important piece. I really want parents to be empowered to own this journey. And I've spoken about this over the years. You have to have the highest expectation. What is that saying? Shoot for the stars, because even if you miss, or shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. It's that same principle. And if you find that there's a physician or a care provider or anybody, a teacher that's discounting what your child can do, what they can accomplish, the improvements that can be seen just because they have a diagnosis of autism, change, that teacher, that therapist, that provider. You have to have a team. You are the manager, and you have to have a team that believes in your child as much as you do, because even our nonverbal kiddos, they feel when people don't believe in them, think they're stupid. I mean, if I could tell you the things that we've gone through over, you if you're an autism parent, you know what I'm talking about. And it's our job to make sure that the people that we allow around our kids believe in them the way we do. Because in this day and age, to have a viewpoint that autism is purely genetic, I think is willfully ignorant. And even if you don't believe in autism recovery, that's fine. Whatever you have going on with your child, whether it's constipation, whether it's food intolerances or sensory meltdowns or lack of sleep, there are things that can improve all of those. Now, there is no one set protocol. There's no one set thing that's going to work for anybody, including IonCleanse. The key is finding what works for your child, but don't let anybody discount how far your child can go in life.
Yeah, amen. All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your conversation with me today. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Gosh, no. Was that 20 questions? Did we
Yeah,
hit
no,
20?
I'm not sure. We'll say yes for just to go out there and see if someone fact checks us. Um, we do have some questions in the Q&A, so if we're not at 20, we're definitely going to get there. I'm going to let you take the lead on these, Terry, unless you want me to step in. What is the gut infection you mentioned that caused the behaviors of anger, rigidity? That's from Tracy
Clostridia.
Martinez.
Yep, Clostridia.
What is
So
Clostridia?
it is a bacteria. So you may have heard of something called C. diff. That is one form of Clostridia bacteria. Not all Clostridia is C. diff. And so I've actually had families be told by physicians, your child can't possibly have Clostridia because they don't have chronic diarrhea. That is absolutely false. So, having had the opportunity to work side by side with Dr. William Shaw, who is one of the leaders in autism research and understanding some of these things, he's done amazing work, especially in Clostridia. My son's Clostridia levels were some of the highest that he had ever seen since starting the lab. So when I say my son's gut was a mess, I mean my son's gut was a mess. He actually has a webinar on Clostridia and gives protocols for treatments and things like that. And you can have Clostridia and yeast tag teaming, and that's what we had going on. And we haven't really seen a reoccurrence. We did a course of a product called Biocidin and a specific probiotic from Research Nutritionals, and were really successful. And this was after years of even antibiotics. It was a gnarly infection to try and get under wraps, but I could always tell when it was flaring. One, his bowel movements were extremely stinky, very offensive bowel movements, and his frustration tolerance was negative 100.
Um, Appreciate that. All right, Krista Gray has a question. It looks like it might be more for our customer service team, but as an IonCleanse practitioner, maybe you can shed some light. I soaked and cleaned both my arrays recently in the solution with your directions provided, and now the outcome in the tub has changed. Every tub looks exactly the same. Two clients have mentioned a major difference, no pun intended. We love puns, Krista, and questioned me. I've double checked the connections, checked all parts, seems fine and intact. Why would this happen and what should I do? I'm not sure. We do have an awesome customer service team that might be able to shed some light. I don't exactly know. Cleaning the arrays with the ascorbic acid soak should not really affect anything. The results in the tub are very typically specific to the people in the tub. Can you add anything to that, Terry?
I can't.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-mm.
Krista, my call our office 303-755-0112. Hit option 2. Our customer service team will answer. They're in the office today, and we can get to the bottom of it. And she also said, "I love this lady. So does a major difference." Denise, I have a neighbor that was told their child under 2 has autism variants DDX3X. Will this help her too? I just want to step in. Anything related to toxicity, the ion cleanse can help, not specifically autism. Does not treat or cure any disease, illness, anything like that. But I think Terry would love to add to that.
Yeah, I feel like in the realm of give it a shot, I mean, it's like we talked about, it's non-invasive, it's pleasant to do, it's super easy, and the worst thing is that you get no response. I think it's definitely worth a try. My viewpoint is toxicity is playing a role in most cases of autism. I think toxicity is playing a role in most things. When we look at our rates of chronic illness, toxicity is playing a role. And I can't see, I mean, when you look at what you might want to do with that person is share the two Thinking Moms Revolution studies and look at the ATEX scores of all of the participants, look at their ages, and then look at the response after 120 days. The results sort of speak for themselves, but at the end of the day, give it a try because there's no one size fits all and nothing is helpful for everybody.
Thank you, Terry. Debbie, also shout out to Debbie Norman on the call, typically on these calls with me. She's awesome. Dr. Debbie's great. Thank you for helping Krista with her question. I really appreciate that. Always feel free to chime in on these chats and questions, audience. We know everybody has great experiences. Um, let's see. Just did that one. In the chat, someone asked, "Do you know much about hereditary hemochromatosis?" I read that while you were answering the last question, so I wouldn't stumble over it. Or iron overload. If so, could it be connected with autism? Is the foot bath safe for people like that? Lots of questions. Thanks, Judy. The conventional medical approach for hemochromatosis is phlebotomy.
I think I know a mom whose adult son with autism has hemochromatosis, but I'm not sure if I can't remember if she was in one of the TMR studies. Because I think she was very involved in TMR going through when her son was going through puberty. So I don't have an answer to that one because I haven't worked with any clients with iron overload. Um, my own daughter had one lab value of high iron, and she does the foot baths, but I can't really tell you whether or not it made an impact because we haven't done follow-up labs. So I can't answer that one. I'm sorry.
I can say there's not a contraindication for using the ion cleanse, unless that involves a medication that where missing a dose could cause an issue. So as long as there's no medication the person's taking where they must have every dose, I don't see a contraindication for the hemochromatosis. So again, just give it a try. It can't hurt. Um, Denise, these folks are Amish. Is there someone they could call? We actually work with a few Mennonite and Amish clinics in Pennsylvania, depending on what state they're in or willingness to travel. Yes. Denise, if you wanted to connect them with me, Charles at amajordifference.com or call the office 303-755-0112, hit option one, you'll get me. You can call me, you can connect them with me directly. I'd love to suss this out with you more. Um, Someone mentioned ear clip stickers for their children to help them in the bucket longer. Any suggestion besides electronics? I think on the last call we had with Dr. Rahav, she mentioned there's a pressure point on the ear and simply like rubbing on the ear at the top of the ear could calm a kid down. So outside of that, I don't know of any products, but if you would like to dig into it a little more, just Google ear pressure point relaxation, and you could probably find just some techniques you could do with your fingers or hands to that might be successful.
And I've always had really good luck. We used to have one of those little Tykes tables, the smaller tables, and the tub, slid right under there, and they could sit in their little Tykes chair. We would get out the sensory bin, Play-Doh, coloring books, any sort of therapeutic item that we could do, finger knitting, things like that. any preferred activity paired with this can be a really great incentive. And then, unless you've seen hyperactivity after it, a lot of times, once kids get their feet in the water, they actually do calm down. And AMD does make a cutout lid so that if there's any aversion to the visual, what's going on in the tub visually, that can really help. Or, being able to read a book and not worry about it falling in the tub and getting all gross. But anything your child likes to do, I used to love pairing that with Ion Cleanse.
Awesome. All right, looks like we've gotten to everybody. We're very near the hour. Thanks again, Terry. This has been super cool. Before we let Terry go, does anybody have any other questions or comments? They are most welcome. Doesn't look like it. Again, if you still have follow-ups, reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help. Denise, definitely, if you would like to connect your people to the Amish or Mennonite clinics we're working with, I'd be happy to do that. And outside of that, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Terry, for coming. This has been a pleasure. I'm very, again, just so appreciative you made time. Getting to know you every time we hang out is so much fun. So, cheers.
Thank you, Charles. It's been
Yeah.
great being here, as always.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next month. Peace.